Today I want to talk about watercolor, and I use watercolor a little bit differently in that I use black line with it, at least for the moment. That's the way I'm working with watercolor. And I usually let watercolor mix itself on the paper rather than on the palette. So you'll see a lot of instances when I do watercolor that it's just the raw color kind of going in there and mixing together, and then going from there. Some things like this over here on this side. I have a lot of different tools that I like to use when I'm out and about, and I should clarify that my use of watercolor is primarily in a sketchbook at this point. I am doing other pieces as well, separate pieces of paper, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but mostly my watercolor is done as much as possible on location. So I'm going to talk a little bit about palettes, and this one's a mess, but actually it works for me. Talk about my color choices, palettes, type of paint I like to use. To get started, this is a travel watercolor brush, so it just kind of folds back on itself, and you can stow it away in your paint tin. There are a number of these on the market. This is a Schmick. I like this one a lot. It holds, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 14 half pans. And I like that because I can get a little bit of a variation in what I'm looking to do, get some warm and cool versions of the colors going. You also, and I'll talk a little bit about this, you take an old Altoids tin and then convert that to a watercolor tin palette as well, and just taking some half pans and then taking some little double stick magnets, sticky on one side, magnet on the other, and you stick it in there and then it holds it in place. This tin is another Schmick, and the nice thing about this one is it actually has a canteen basically built into a little water vessel, so you can fill it up with water and screw it, and then when you screw it up tight, and then when you get to where you're going, you can unscrew it, pour the water out, and then you hang it on the side, and then you can actually paint with it. It's the empty water receptacle right there. Another nice thing about these pre-made tins is that they have these little rings where you can put your finger through them, so you can keep a hold of them while you're working. So that's actually comes in really handy. For this demonstration, I'm just using a previously drawn ink drawing of a face, a portrait. And again, I mentioned earlier that I just like to let the paint mix itself on the palette, or I should say mix itself on the paper, not the palette. And so I'm going to, what I like to do is just kind of wet my surface that I know that I'm going to touch first. In this case, the skin. This is a kind of a quick drawing of Ursula Le Guin when she recently passed away. So I'm just kind of wetting the paper so it'll accept the paint. And what I start with is a little bit of a Hansa yellow light. Let me clean that up. That's a little dirty from the last time that I used it, which really for me doesn't impact me that much because I am going to let this kind of bleed around the page. Everybody paints differently in this medium. I'm going to just kind of do it my way. I usually start with the lightest color or value. Generally I work light to dark. And I don't want to commit I'm committing in that I'm letting everything mix on the paper, but I'm also trying to keep it fairly light until I kind of figure out what I want to do next. So now I'm mixing in a little, this is the green gold, and I use primarily Daniel Smith watercolors. I also use some Winsor Newton Professional watercolors. Those are my two favorite at the moment. But that being said, I do use some Holbein watercolor as well. So now that I have my green, I'm just going to start letting that bleed in and keeping my brush full of water. And I'm trying not to overwork it. For me, letting the paint do its thing by bleeding and mixing itself. On the palette. This is a an orange. It's an orange. It's an orange color. And I'm going to use that and just start dropping that in here and there. Kind of doing the traditional localized colors, you know, color coming forward that's warmer, playing around. And I'm going to go in with some blues. And kind of working around that as well. So I'm working pretty quickly. I'm conscious of what I'm doing, but I'm trying to not to be too conscious of what I'm doing, if you understand what I'm going for here. Again, a little bit like when I make a collage, I'm trying to let this image tell me what it wants to be in terms of color. And I'm liking what's starting to happen over here, where this is all starting to blend together. And then I think if I were too conscious of what I was doing, I would then overwork it or kind of negate what I'm trying to do. And so I'm letting those two colors kind of blend on the. I'm starting to get that purple from that opera rose and that ultramarine blue. Now I'm not looking at reference for this one. I'm not looking at anything. I'm just letting this happen. So this is more to see what was, just for demonstrations. I'm just going to drop a little more red in there because everybody's got a red nose, right? And a little alizarin crimson here. Hit a red in the eye. And then I come up here. One of my favorite blues is a Prussian blue. And I really enjoy it. So I'm working wet on wet, so I'm not giving it a lot of time to dry. There are times then when you'll go back in with your paint after it dries, and you can go back in and start layering in some of the details or variations of your color. Really like that right there. It's pretty exciting to me. Actually, I'm really interested in in that area right there on that eye, the way that's the color's starting to come together. Oh, I'm gonna back out now. The shadow of my arm. It's in the way. So again, there's nothing incredibly thought out in terms of placement, other than I'm just kind of trusting myself to kind of go around and make some marks, let some paint make its way around. Thinking about maybe really shadow areas with just some more folds would be. And then the paper, this is the handbook sketch pad. It's got nice drawing paper in it, and it handles watercolor pretty well. It does buckle, but I actually like when it buckles. Where the paint starts to gather and collect. I think it's an opportunity for some more of those happy accents to occur. Might be a little too much there. See what happens. Now when you let the paint dry, of course you can go back in and draw with your brush and get some more details on there. I will use my palette to kind of wipe off some excess paint. I'm kind of liking where that's going. A little bit more dark there. I kind of like to play with the gimmicky spatter, but it's kind of fun. See where that. So now I'm looking at this, and I think it needs to really draw some more contrast between the light facial colors and the background here. And so I'm just going to experiment here and see what happens. I'm going in with some really heavy Payne's gray, and I'm going to let it bleed in with that color from the face into the background back here, which I think I'm a fan of. And I'm not wetting, and I may regret it, I'm not wetting the background like I did the face. And I'm going to see if I can get some nice brush strokes in there, and trying to keep the paint still wet but giving it a ragged edge in a quick manner. Kind of cool. I'm gonna go back with my Opera Rose, kind of bleed some of that color in there too, just to give it a little more life so it's not so flat. Now, I'm not sure what's going to happen, so we will see.
reflection off the lights in the window right now, so see the water's still pretty wet. Not too bad. Kind of liking it. Maybe bring a little bit of that Payne's gray into this shirt area, clothing. I might catch that pupil in heavier, but heavy under the lid there, and see what that looks like. It's a little bit of that painting on top of the dried paint on top of it to get a little bit more detail. But then this is always a danger right now to start overworking it. Some of the things I like about it, I could easily lose. So I think I'm going to step back from it at this point.